Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have so many of you joining us for what I think is going to be a pretty exciting and transformative session in and of itself. The title of our webinar today is Transforming Lives: How a Holistic Model Elevates Vision Rehabilitation. And our presenter is the Future Insight CEO. Randy gave us a fabulous presentation at our Scottsdale conference, and I know everyone didn't get to see it even when they were at the conference. So we have asked him to do it again, and he has fortunately said yes. So without further ado, Randy, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to give a special thank you to Vision Serve Alliance, not only for allowing me to share with you in this webinar, but for generally being the foundation of bringing us together for collaboration, right? So fundamental to everything we do. I want to specifically thank all of you for the work you choose and for coming in here to at least take an open-minded look at the influence holistic approaches can have to our vision rehabilitation. I'll do my best to make sure this is a worthy use of our time, but let's start with who I am. I am Randy Pierce, or if my Future Insight staff is being playful, Dr. Randy Pierce. And my doctorate is in humane letters. Now, let me say that slower. It's in humane letters. Otherwise, my guide dog gets a little upset with me that it's inhumane letters that I'm celebrating. But, there's a big difference between a PhD and an honorary doctorate. And they each have value. I won't diminish the choice that UNH made in giving me the honorary degree. It's based on experience, and that really ties into this whole notion of holistic approach. And that's part of the reason why I took our sidebar through there, that and for my guide dog's well-being. But so transforming lives. How will a holistic model elevate the work of vision rehabilitation? And that's just it. It's got to work in conjunction. And I want to share candidly, right? I intend to share from my life experiences. I am somebody who was fully sighted, lost my sight in 2000 at the age of 22. Well, in 1989 at the age of 22. In 2000, I lost the rest of my sight, going from legally blind to illegally blind. So I sort of understand the full spectrum of it. But I also want to share not just my experiences, but my work experiences as well, right? Because I work in this field because it's a passion. I understand the journey, and I understand what are the key parts that took me from somebody begrudgingly accepting what vision rehabilitation could do and living and thriving. So hopefully I can bring that all together, but let's start. What is holistic care? So the first notion I wanted to take with it is there's many definitions, and all of them have some level of accuracy, right? It's about managing the whole person. That's the root of the word holistic, even though it doesn't have the W, it's a Greek term. But what it does suggest is, what are all the other attributes of our lives? So I choose a visionary definition first. And the reason I do that is because the high level mindset is how we're going to embrace our stakeholders and get them to understand and be on board in joining it. And our stakeholders have many levels of it. We'll certainly dig into that. But I'm going to also try to read what the definition is for you. And for those of us who may not be able to read it, like me, I don't know if it's an accessible screen slide. But the basic concept is, most of the aspects of our lives, when many of us lose our sight, we are willing to sacrifice because we just want to get sufficiency to get by. That's the first goal. And sometimes we're doing that begrudgingly because we're in this dichotomy of feeling like a burden and needing a little support, whether it's training or direct support. So when I want to invite people for how to get there, I want to excite how this definition of holistic will change that. So here's the notion. Holistic care in visual service refers to a person-centric model. It supports clients not only with their functional vision rehabilitation, but with emotional, physical, and social well-being. How does this improve long-term outcomes? Well, we're going to show a little bit of that. The data is still being developed on that, but I think the notion is, if we can show how that's going to embrace people into it, that's where we're going to get the win. It's going to drive client satisfaction. It's going to align with the whole person health strategies. that are increasingly being prioritized in healthcare today. And I want to look at what's the clinical definition and why do I want to do that? Because it's great to get your stakeholders to say, here's the value in this program. We're going to get people excited in not just the vision rehabilitation, but in living their lives. For our clinical staff, for our providers, they're often going to need to be inspired to understand what does it mean in terms of appreciating their work. And that's true of our direct providers in vision rehabilitation and our possible providers internally on all the other services involved. So what is the language of your team and why is it subtly different? Because words have so much power. A little semantic difference is going to go a long way. So I want to be clear, it's supplemental to the VR essentials. And they have to hear that. There's in no way that I don't think the foundation shouldn't be that vision rehabilitation. But it's going to involve the practical applications of all these skills. The issue really, as I said, is getting individuals excited and invited. What's their passion? What's going to make them say, I want to take what's here and use it? There's this old slogan, practice makes perfect. And I don't personally subscribe to it because I don't know what perfect looks like, not because of my sight, but because it's hard to measure. What is perfect? I like the expression better, practice makes progress. And I bring it up in this instance because it applies directly to our vision rehabilitation skills. If we don't use them, we lose them. But I don't want to just avoid the negative. I always want to take the approach of how do we promote the positive in this? And in the case of those skills is how do we take it so that they're not just using them at a minimal level to get by, but taking them to say, I'm excited to do this. And in order to do this, I need to use these skills. And once we start that process, that's when I think a light bulb flips on in the heads of the folks who we're trying to work with. The real goal is to help each individual thrive in whatever way is important to them. And candidly, those first steps are surviving, but that's just a step to where we want to get them. So here's the clinical definition. Holistic care and vision services is an integrated approach. It wants the full spectrum of an individual's needs, physical, emotional, social, and functional. It's going to support independence, well-being, and quality of life. All of this beyond what our vision loss has to do with, right? We're not about our sight loss. We're about all the things that we used to do. So I'm going to ask if you'll flip slide for me again. And I want to talk about reaching our peak potential. And, I use this term in a couple of different ways. I have lost several things in my life. The cause that took my sight is a neural disorder. So my optic nerves were one of the things I lost. I also lost other nerve systems. I lost some damage to my cerebellum, which put me in a wheelchair for 1 year, 8 months, and 21 days. And I do not share that from a pity perspective. I share it because it highlighted something I learned along all of those ways, which is that when you lose something, you get a greater appreciation for what you've lost. And specifically in the case of peak potential, I lost the ability to walk. And honestly, the impact of that might have been harder to me than my sight loss for me. I was a very active, engaged athlete. And one of the things I began to do was find ways to climb mountains because I was just walking in amazing areas. But I like the notion, I like the double entendre that peak potential is how do we find what's important to us? How do we find a goal or an objective that's worth us striving towards? And for me, it was those walks on those mountains. It also highlights some notion of sight versus vision. So I shared the slide that's up here. Let me describe it for those of us who can't see, right? This is a picture that was taken on January 20th, 2012. And I am on a very steep slope. It's all snow covered. It's probably a 30-degree, 35-degree angle. I have a guide dog who's a yellow Labrador retriever, and he is pointing his muzzle like an arrow to the summit that's probably about 30 yards ahead of us. His eyes are closed, and he's basking in the sun that makes his golden fur pop against the blue sky background, pop out against that crisp white snow. And in this image, I've got a trekking pole in my right hand and I'm hunched over and tired with my other hand on the harness. And I share this because there's some powerful insights to this, right? I'm trying to reach, in this case, a literal peak, but I'm also realizing that I've got some guidance to get there. And I emphasize this a lot of time in presentations, right? I'm still accountable in this journey, just like all of the individuals we serve, right? I don't just tell my guide dog, take me somewhere. I'd be at the dog park every day, all day. Instead, we work together in tandem, find out what our goals are and how can we best reach them. So that's sort of the notion of a little bit of vision behind the site that I described, right? I've never seen the image. I just had it described to me in many ways. And I share it powerfully because I think sometimes we forget the difference between sight and vision, right? Sight lets you see what's around you. Vision lets you see what's around you in a different way and all the possibilities that can come from it. And the vision in this scene is twofold. First, that we need a little guidance to reach our goals. All of us do. I don't know any exceptions to that. And understanding who and when to take guidance from and how to do it is important. That includes the foundation of vision rehabilitation in a sight loss journey. It also includes when to bring in some other guides to handle other subtle parts that are going to be vital in the goal. And it also reminds us of the accountability. Let me speak to the second point that I think is vision-wise behind the scenes in this photo. And that's that, frankly, I'm hunched over and tired because it was hard work. And ironically, on Monday of this week, I took a vacation day and climbed the same peak. And it's a lot harder without snow filling in all the twisty, rocky routes. But I choose hard work because it's adversity. And adversity is an opportunity that gives us a choice, all of us, right? Do we say, I can't, I won't, I quit? Or do we say, I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to get the right support? And most of us in the face of challenges probably go through both of those considerations. The first is the excuse mentality, and you never get there. The second is the reason mentality. And it means you may have to do things differently, but you're likely to still reach the destination you're trying to. Now, I share that in my life, going blind, at the age I did, a lot of people thought it was one of the worst things in my life. And I looked at it as the best because once I learned to change my response, once I got the right guidance and encouragement, I began to see that the opportunities were there. And that same mindset carries through with everything. It's what I call positive adversity. And it's really the crux of this holistic model, which is to say, what is the positive thing, the positive adversity that somebody might want that inspires and drives them to want to put those skills and tools to work. And when we can find that out, that's the goal that's going to change their life. That's going to change them from the I can, I won't to the I'm learning, I'm growing. And then we just take that and apply it to more things. Now, I did hear a message come through. I just want to share. I will get to a slide, probably about slide 11, slide 10. And at that point, I'll take all the questions that you put in the Q&A box. I'm happy to try to address them in that time window. I will leave enough time. So I encourage you to start putting them there now if you wish, and I'll follow up when we get there. And I want to talk about the broader impact of profound vision loss, right? These are the reasons we want to help folks, most of all, right? It's not just help them with vision rehabilitation, but get them inspired to use all of those skills and live their life, because here's the impact. It's not just a sensory impairment. We know this. It's a critical social determinant of health. It amplifies all the risks across multiple aspects of our lives, right? For those of you who are familiar, the Big Data Project really highlighted that. When my state, and I purchased it for my state, when I read things like 29% more likely to have a heart attack, 27% more likely to have a stroke, 29% more likely to be clinically depressed, 1 out of 2 over the age of 65 are going to have a fall requiring medical treatment every year. I mean, those things are devastating. And that's what we're talking here, right? So we want to ensure that that's all true if they're not met with the comprehensive support that gets people living their lives. So why does vision loss lead to these cascading health changes, right? It's because reduced independence, reduced mobility, reduced access, and reduced engagement. So, as I said before, clients learn the skills, but they learn them at a minimal level often, not because we're not willing to teach them, to guide them. Sometimes it's because the time allotments that we get are less than most of us would like. Sometimes because the cost can get challenging, but really the primary reason is because we don't get the individuals we serve inspired and excited enough to put them to practice. If we can find activities that resonate for them, we draw them into doing more. And all of that, when they're helping, when they're pursuing things that matter to them, it reinforces these essential skills. So I share the slide more directly, right? Vision loss is not just a sensory impairment. It leads to cascading health challenges, most of what I shared already, but I'm going to ask us to flip to slide 6. And this is a continuation of that broader impact. I want to stress first and foremost, those outcomes are not inevitable. We see a turnaround when people start getting vision rehabilitation and when they start applying it. And I know that there's some limited data out there. We'll dig into that a little bit, but I know that one of the other benefits of Vision Serve Alliance, they're digging in to extract that data, because that data is going to drive our ability to get the funding sources. It's going to drive a lot of our abilities to make change. So I want to share vision rehabilitation is essential. And I never say the word but, right? Because but means exclude, ignore everything I just said. Here's what I really mean. And I don't. I mean it inclusive with and. It is essential, and it must be integrated with that broader health approach. So here are the points. If we know they've got reduced physical activity, what will help us address that? That's one of the causes. We know they get nutritional challenges. They have trouble accessing a location to acquire it. We know they have trouble reading to learn and discern the nutritional information, and sometimes they even have trouble preparing it, right? Those are all aspects of it. Some of that is going to be covered by the functional VR work that we can do. Some of it might not be, like transportation. Mental health burden. I mentioned the numbers on more likely to be depressed or experience clinical depression than their counterparts without sight loss. Chronic disease management, and again, that fall injury risk. What is most important is that with comprehensive care, we know these outcomes can be significantly reduced. Can they be halted? Well, who knows, right? But it's hard to say something is safe. What we want to do is make things more safe. We want to mitigate risk. We're really in the risk management issue. Slide 7, we're going to get into the kind of the core rehabilitation services that you already know. Most of you are implementing them in a regular way. You might even see some overlap, but there might be some subtle difference. So let's dig into the essential tools. Vision rehabilitation therapy, OT or low vision specialists, orientation and mobility, assistive technology training, daily living skills instruction, and low vision aids. Probably most of you are very familiar with those. So what's the challenge? How do we get them integrating and passionate about all of those? How do we get them over the obstacle of self-deferring from using them or willing to push their training? And I went through it on my own right? I tell the story that when I got my first cane from my O&M instructor, I went out legally blind. I could see how people reacted to me. I was getting frustrated, and I said, well, maybe I can just make do using my narrow vision. I took my cane and I broke it over my knee and threw it out. And that was really dumb on 2 parts. One, these canes are sturdy. It hurt when I broke it over my knee. Secondly, a little while later, I experienced a reason to understand why it was so important to me, even though I could get by and try to makeshift it. And I'm sure many of us have encountered this. And then I had to buy a new cane, right? First one was free, the rest is on me. So, there's some lessons there, but I understand the resistance. So how do we get them over the obstacle? And that's really the crux of what the holistic is going to come in. But before I address that, I want to just share. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get our team to buy in. It's going to be hard to get a community of support to buy in, right? Because we're going to have to build the programs that bring this in. But we can do hard things. Because even for us, we're facing that same obstacle I sort of mentioned before. Do we say we can't, we won't, we quit? Or do we say, right, how do we get the right support? How do we learn? How do we grow? And I assume that's part of why you're here. I'm going to share in a moment an audio described video of when I was invited to do a Tough Mudder. And at the time, I didn't know what a Tough Mudder was. Some of you may not either. So I'll share as we lead into it. But it is basically a 10 to 12 mile race on miserable footing. And they've inserted giant obstacles that were originally designed to test British special forces. And that's not exactly where I would have expected my athletic journey to go once I lost my sight. But I think there were some powerful lessons, right? First, how do we get into any of these things? There's a quote by John Wooden, one of the winningest coaches in college basketball history. He stole it from Ben Franklin, just modified it. It says, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan, which means absolutely you can just try, and sometimes that's what we need to do. But if we can take the time to find a plan, has somebody else already done it? What's their approach? Or maybe we need to pioneer a slightly new solution, but let's do it with thought. So when I said I wanted to run this, that's exactly what I did. I started researching, and turns out this Australian gentleman had attempted a Tough Mudder with very limited sight. And I listened to everything he had to say and why it went wrong for him. And then, Einstein's definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. We modified it. And I took my team up, and we had tremendous results. We went up to this Great Northeast Tough Mudder in Maine, and those travel the world. And when they saw how we had done, and my team was amazing. We succeeded on every obstacle. And they said, we want the world to see this. We want to fly you out to LA, and we want you to do this on film. And so interestingly, right, I said yes. And I want to pause on that, because this is something that's going to happen for our clients when we take this holistic approach, I think. I think it happens at some level in the VR world, is that when we set that positive adversity, that goal that I mentioned way back when I described the summit photo, right, we get 3.5 really important benefits. One, if it's positive adversity, we're more likely to bring positive things into our world because we're trying to. It's the first easy thing. Two, we develop the skills and the tools necessary to do these things, right? It's the practice makes progress mindset. And three, we build confidence by the success that those first two things bring about, right? Competence, skills lead to confidence, and confidence leads us to choosing to step out of our comfort and say yes to experiences in life. And, in this case, that's what happened for me, but that's also what I want to subtly try to find ways to do for the individuals we serve. Let me give you the last description of the big obstacle that's in this. I really got the video off the ground, and then I'll ask for it to be played. But here's the description. Climb 25 feet up this ladder to a platform. There's water down below you. You got to jump 10 feet out to grab a T-bar trapeze bar. You got to swing on that trapeze bar, and at the end of the swing, you're going to let go. And as you're going through the air, they want you to ring a bell that's just hanging in midair. And I know you're all muted, but I hope that sounds ridiculous to you, because it sure did to me, right? And here's the notion. 1 out of 10 people succeeded in doing it, and most of them failed in the same place. And the power of perspective, the reason we collaborate with each other, with Vision Serve Alliance, is because it helps us look at things in a slightly different way. And that perspective is everything. One of the members of my team said, here is where everybody's failing. Here's what they're trying to do. Let's do something different. And I'll tell you what it is after we show you the video. But let's see how we do ringing the bell. Would you play the slide for me, please?
A title appears, Heroes of Summer by Oberto, as peach-colored pre-dawn light illuminates mountains in shades of purple. Cars pull into a parking lot and athletes move towards an entrance. A Tough Mudder flag blows in the breeze.
I am Randy Pierce, and for about 20 years now, I've been totally blind, and that's going to make this Tough Mudder a little more challenging.
The team prepares, and we see guide dog Autumn, who has earned the day off.
The truth is, going blind was really hard. I thought everything fun and everything important in my life was no longer possible. And it's just ludicrous to me, because now I, climb mountains and run marathons and do Tough Mudders. And our message here really for us is we're out living the life that we believe, right? That there aren't obstacles, there are opportunities.
Hundreds of athletes bounce with excitement at the start. Randy and team are in the middle of the crowd wearing bright yellow t-shirts with the slogan, I see no obstacles.
Tough Mudder, 10.5 miles of just awfulness.
Everyone scrambles up a steep and dusty California hill, encouraging each other under a clear blue sky. The team crawls through mud under barbed wire, and Randy describes his approach afterwards.
I reached up, felt gently, found where the barb was, put my hand not on it so I knew my head wouldn't hit it.
Gotcha.
Randy jumps from an obstacle into deep water.
My life isn't about my blindness, it's about the choice I made and how to respond.
Dangling by one arm, Randy reaches for a handhold and misses, plummeting into water.
I don't feel bad, I gave everything I could. That's my goal every time, right?
The more I invest in life and be in those moments, the more rewards I keep getting.
Randy tries to run up a steep quarter pipe and slides back down. On a second attempt, he pulls Jose down with him. With help from Lauren and Sky on the ground and Greg on top, Randy conquers the obstacle and high-fives people at the summit. The team climbs up tall stairs, and at the top, Randy reaches his cane out to feel a small trapeze bar at the edge of his reach as Jose steadies him from behind.
Learning to look at the world differently is the key to really having vision, and vision is always going to be way more important than sight.
Randy shrugs away his hesitations and leaps out for the trapeze.
Look at this video that's gone viral of Randy Pierce participating in a Tough Mudder challenge, despite being blind. Randy jumped in a trapeze, swung out, and rang a bell only 10% of contestants managed to touch.
Randy pumps his fist from the water.
You know, every day of my life, I wish I could see. But I would choose to be blind to learn all the lessons I've learned, to come to this point in my life and have so many great people around me that I wouldn't change it. And blindness, if that's what it took for me to get here and have such a wonderful life, then I welcome it.
Randy is enthusiastically greeted by his guide dog Autumn at the finish, and they play on the muddy ground as the team looks on. He stands and triumphantly thrusts his arms in the air. Oberto Beef Jerky, you get out what you put in. To meet all our heroes, visit heroes.oberto.com.
So a couple of things. First off, we get a shameless plug from our sponsor at the end, and it is truly shameless, right? Because without partnerships, we'll struggle to do more of the things we want to do, right? So Oberto Beef Jerky paid for the trip and the video recording and then the marketing of it, which is, all fantastic. We're going to need to find partners to do some of this holistic work, because what's one of the biggest challenges? Well, it's going to be staffing and it's going to be funding in this journey, in all of the things we look. But there's a couple other things that stand out from this, right? So first off, let's talk about Oberto's mantra for it was, you get out what you put in. I think that's true. It's specifically true, in my mind, about vision rehabilitation, right? It's about learning to use that foundation and build it out. It's not just using my cane to show I can walk around the block. It's using my cane to go somewhere that's important to me, right? It's going to be all of those things. It's going to be finding the what's important in that, right? And then the more that we use it, the better we'll get at all those things. There's another thing that I love. They gave us shirts that said, I see no obstacles. And, my friend Jose read that off as he was describing it. But of course, I don't see the obstacles. But that's not really what it's about. It's about for all of us. How do we choose to look at what's stopping us? Is it an obstacle, or is it an opportunity for us to say, we're going to find the solution because what we're trying to get to, the destination, is worth it? Right? That's the holistic gift in all of this, right? To put more into it because it's meaningful to you. If clients minimize their rehabilitation skills, they're minimizing their lives. If we excite and invite more, they're unleashing their full potential, their peak potential, as I might like to say. So I'm going to ask us to flip slide, and we're on slide 9, just to see that we're progressing pretty fast and far, but I think we've covered a lot already. And let's talk about expanding the model now with the holistic elements. So in 2018, in a British Journal of General Practice study, what they noticed is the significant improvement in the quality of life, the emotional well-being, and the social engagement being fundamental to that. And that study was the first that I could identify when I was looking that really showed how getting people engaged on across the board spectrum started showing more improvement to them. And that's all the way back to 2018. But why is that so important? Right? And I want us to get more data and more studies, but I don't think it's surprising. The way I like to frame it is, people have a longing for belonging, right? We want to know that we're part of something, all people in some way. So how do we connect? How do we make them part of their world? And that's by engagement into whatever activity is important. But I also think they need a smattering of mattering, right? They need to know that what they do makes a difference. They don't want to just do it because it's possible. They want to do it because it has meaning in their lives, for others. It's what I like to say is, we are better when we connect. We're better when we have purpose. It's right. It causes, neurologically, we release oxytocin when we get to celebrate those moments, when we get to achieve those moments. But there's a whole array of neurotransmitters that happen that don't happen when we're not engaged and active in something. And I don't necessarily mean physically active. Engage the artistic brain, engage your music, engage your mind, engage your crafts. Find what's important. So let's talk about what's on the slide directly. We want to attend their emotional, psychological well-being. Many forms of that, right? Some peer support can do that. Counseling can do that. It's really interesting to me, and the study was done by Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They were studying what happens when they reach out for peer support to suggest, let's talk about some counseling. Let's talk about adjusting to blindness. And what they discovered is that if the person who reached out to them was not sight impaired, not shared life experience? Well, 27% said yes. The rest said no, 83%. Conversely, shared life experience, 87% said yes. So how do you find ways to engage and invite them into that? But more powerfully, if you ask every single person that got into that whether they thought it was valuable, the results are staggering. It's in the 90% of this was what I needed. So social inclusion, that's part of what that peer support notion goes, but it's not just with their peers in the sight loss world, it's their peers in all their other passions and pursuits, right? That's what speaks to purpose of your identity, right? Your self-determination, right? I am a hiker, I am a runner, I am a singer, right? We're all many things. I'm also blind, but I want to be connected and engaged in all of those things. And honestly, the more I step away that vision isn't what's defining me, it's those passions and pursuits. Because the sight loss for most of the folks we serve probably came secondarily. How about environmental accessibility, right? Can I get out in the world? I hear from our clients all the time that they think their number one challenge is transportation. I get it, and I'm going to dig into a transportation program that highlights a holistic example in a minute. But I think they are not lying, but I think they're missing the full picture. I think it's the isolation of which transportation is a significant part of that. And one of the benefits post-COVID is that we have so much more accessibility to our virtual world being accessible. But it's still about that accessibility to the environments that matter to us. And much of that can be physical for our world, getting to where our peers are doing the things that we care about. And that's the community-based driven peer support. So let's flip slide 10, and talk about the pillars of this. And after this, I'll dig into that program I just talked to you about, and then we'll be getting to some questions real quick here. So what I want to suggest in building and finding and identifying these pillars is this is your opportunity, and some of you are doing some parts of these, but to really explore, define, and refine the priorities for your organizations and the individuals that you serve. There is a holistic track that's still ongoing that started at that model and that's available. And if you reach out to the folks at VSA, we can get you connected to be digging in deeper where people are saying, here's what I'm doing, here's what's working, here's what I want to try. How do you do that? So here's the list of the pillars. Mental health and resilience. How do we make our minds and heads stronger, right? It's no surprise that we live in a world that has a serious mental health crisis for everyone. And that certainly includes a higher percentage when people are experiencing profound unexpected sight loss. Physical health and wellness. People aren't moving as much often, right? Hadley ran a big campaign on like get moving. And get moving doesn't mean hike a mountain or do a tough mudder, right? Get moving means learn how to walk, how to navigate, just that's an opportunity. Not everybody needs to, not everybody has to. But if the reason you're not is because you don't have confidence in your vision rehabilitation foundation, we got to find something that gets you building that confidence. And it's competence, the skills, and purpose to use the skills. Technology and innovation, right? Certainly there's some part of that that is straightly tied to vision rehab, but there's so much more in a world that most of us are struggling to keep up with. A year ago at this time, the Ray-Ban Metas were brand new and we didn't know what the impact is. And now I'd be astounded if most of us aren't in some way hearing questions about how people can integrate them into their lives, right? Creative and purpose-driven living. That's the notion that, right, when you first lose your sight, one of the things many people feel, I certainly did, is, well, all the things that are meaningful or fun, I can't do. And we know that's bogus because we worked in that world, but it's not bogus that that's how people feel. I tell our staff all the time that, there's this old adage that the customer is always right. And I don't think that's true at all. I think what is true is the customer's perspective is always valid. And I think that's true for the people we serve, right? The feeling of helplessness may be very real. And that's our opportunity to try to change that mindset, right? To showcase. And one of the fast tracks there, again, is passion. Community, connection, and belonging, right? These are the pillars. How do we get them out and integrated too? So again, I said challenge is opportunity as well, but it's funding and staffing. So let me talk about one of the ones that we hit that's key to so many of our others. I live here in New Hampshire, rural state, very limited transportation system. That's why so many of our clients say, hey, I don't have a way to get where I want to go. And Yep, we have Uber and Lyft in some parts of New Hampshire, and they pick up guide dog users, 30% of the time, something like that right now. But, they are limited. And so we said, how can we do more with our program? And 3.5 years ago, we started what we playfully call Lions Lift. And it's a riff of Uber and Lyft. We spell it differently to promote no lawsuit. But the notion is, we said, we have Lions clubs that are all over our state, and they already have a connection to mission. In fact, they have two connections, community and site. So that's two connections that we're going to tie in, because what I want to do is decentralize our volunteers. If the drivers are in the area where our clients are, it's easier to convince them and get them into a volunteer program. So, but what does partnership mean? And this is important in this whole notion of getting funding and staffing, is that partnership means both have to get a win. So what could I offer to the Lions Club, for example? Well, I could get a reasonable number of grants to support some limited mileage reimbursement. And I said, if I can do that, because that was the base of our prior program, if I could stretch that, let's see what would happen. I can get them service reports, because they are encouraged to report their service to the community. They're a service organization. They want a measurement. They want to be able to show data, and we can give them that, because it's part of what we do in our everyday lives, right? Is track the work that we do. What else can I do? I can get them connection to the cause in a meaningful way that helps their membership, which most service organizations want anything that'll promote that. What do I get out of that? I get the opportunity to connect the individuals we serve with my volunteer drivers to get the place they want to go. And to start with, let's just make it, if we can get to the urgent things, medical appointments. And boy, immediately our eye doctors are thrilled, because people who need their shots on a regular basis have a more dependable way to get there. So we're bringing in some more partners subtly on that way. Get them maybe to the shopping, some of the critical needs. And that all happened in spades because it's geographically located. We built a program where there's a software component to it that people can determine, is this ride for me? So they're never under pressure. They're selecting in on that. Clients can submit themselves. It is accessible. I won't say its usability is high as I'd like, but the more we get involved, the better we'll build that. I will say that, part of what we'll do is we'll enter that data for them. But here's the real surprise gift, and it wasn't entirely a surprise. As the Lions Club members began joining, and I built a pilot and had them report the results, they're talking with our clients. They're hearing testimony of how much our clients like us, who especially like us when they're getting a ride they never expected before. And several things happened. Last year, in our second full year in the program, they drove our clients around the world, literally 24,000 miles, right? So they didn't actually drive around the world. They drove all over New Hampshire. But that's the amount of miles just that program did. And in doing, they heard all those good reports. And what I noticed is the Lions Club donations we were receiving began to exponentially increase. Half of the Lions Club's drivers say, I'm okay, I don't need the admin. I don't need the reimbursement. So we don't even lose that. But then we're already generating more revenue than it costs to help fund other parts of the program. The other half take it because it goes into their admin budget when they need it. But you see how many wins we built in? And now I've got a host of ambassadors talking about the program. State of New Hampshire has a Volunteer Spirit of New Hampshire program, named it the Outstanding Partnership Program. I'm not trying to boast. I'm trying to celebrate how powerful it is. And this isn't the only answer by any stretch. It is an answer that we found that just expanded the ability to get clients where they wanted to go. Not really part of vision rehabilitation, but all those clients are traveling, are getting better O&M skills, they're getting better social skills, and we're getting more ambassadors everywhere, right? So there's so much to all of this. What about staffing? Well, obviously, this gets to use volunteers. We do have to do some background checks. There's a cost there as well, but it's fairly mitigated. But your staff has to understand that. Did that create more work? Yes. So they have to understand, is the benefit worth it? Does it fit into their models? And you're the ones who are going to know those operations. But that's why we go way back to the clinical definition. Why are we trying to do this? I think most of us at any level in our staffs and ourselves, we're working because we want to make a difference. This mission is important to us at a high level. And when you see that it's going to change their lives, you're more passionate about saying, how and where can I appropriately stretch to do this? Right. And that's what I want to try and engage on all aspects. One other area we added, we have online and in-person programs and activities, and they are meant to hit all those other things. And I know There are organizations that do those generally across the country. Love it. We direct and support those. We have some that we run right here in New Hampshire. And ironically, right, one of our staff members is part-time and lives in Arizona because she handles a lot of the remote programming. But all the crafts, the arts, a little bit of Fitness Friday, a little bit of everything, so that when our staff is doing vision rehabilitation, we're trying to find out what is your passion? What would entice you? And let's show you these programs and let's have enough diversity that'll get you engaging in them. And what we see are some of the results that I think, Jason and Lee may be able to tell you in the future are the results of the rehabilitation work changing those other social determinants of health we started. I'm going to ask you to flip slide for me. I'm going to pause here and we're going to get to some of those questions because this is a picture I took 10 years ago in September. I was on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. The sun is rising. You don't see it in the image, but there's a crater because it's a volcano in Kilimanjaro. We're at 19,300 feet, and there's a glacier in the crater, and the sun is rising, and you can see the curvature of the Earth if you can see. And I'm sitting and reflecting because it was a great accomplishment. It was a big goal of mine to get up there. But like many accomplishments, right? When we get somewhere, our work isn't done. Our work isn't done after this webinar, right? Our work isn't done in moments of celebration, but still celebrate, right? That brings the oxytocin. There's an achievement there. But use it as a place to reflect, review, and revise, sort of as I suggested we might do with our holistic model. And with that in mind, I want to take this point to pause and invite some questions and ask for a little support if there's any already in the Q&A. And I will share that I do have one more slide, or one more official slide and one more connector slide, because I gave you a baker's dozen. But I want to end on a strong point. But let's see what questions we might have on anything or comments, I guess.
We do. We have a question in here from Anicio. I'm also going to unmute or allow people to unmute themselves if they would like to ask a question verbally. Yep. So let's see. Anicio asked, how do you help and encourage professionals themselves to raise their expectations of and believe in their consumers and the skills that they teach?
Well, I get a little bit of a free benefit from my staff because I came into this knowing that, 35 years ago, they gave me the training that took me from that kid that stopped believing in himself to a kid who began applying himself in different ways and has had a series of successful demonstrations in my world. But the examples are everywhere. And I think Steve from Maine, when he got an award at the leadership, he said it, look around this room and how much of our leadership now is people who have a vision impairment. The proof is there. Most of it what we need to do to get there is convince the individual by showing them some of the pathways, excite them to get them motivated to do a little bit more, but use the examples that are out there in every aspect. My staff is 30% visually impaired, which I'm proud of, not because we went out and took pity and hired somebody, but because we've hired great people who also have sight impairment, right? And I think the reality of that is the first step on that front. But I don't know how you work in this field if you don't believe that your work can be successful. But demonstration of it is certainly a big part of it. I think the next part is that celebration. Like I said on the summit, celebrate all the achievements and victories that are happening all over the place to showcase it. And the result of this work is showing that statistically, right? Stories will sell something, but the data tells the real story. How many lives are better? How many of those social determinants are coming down? I hope that answers your question, Anizio.
I have allowed everybody to unmute themselves. So if anybody wants to ask a question, please feel free. We don't have any more in the Q&A right now.
I love it. Make it easy on me if there's not a lot of questions on that front. But I do want to encourage you, right? This is an opportunity and it's collaborative. Maybe you have a celebration of what you've done that you can use as an example, because I know lots of us are exploring this in different ways. I'll share one of our peer support models that I'm excited but haven't gotten into yet. Is that we had 1.5. We had a virtual and a live peer support group that met in Concord, but hard to get people to it. We've decentralized. We have 8 running in that virtual one now. But the one that I think is a huge opportunity that we haven't yet done is that I think one for family members of people who have a sight impairment to let them kind of talk about the challenge. I met my wife, I was totally blind, and she never knew anything else, but boy, she runs around when her family visits trying to prevent them from doing the things that are devastating. And she does it with love, and we could get there in a lot of different ways. But there are moments of frustration for sure. And there are opportunities for understand how to approach things. I can be candid that I'm a jerk sometimes. Well, thank you, Jason. I often probably, but I drop something on the floor and I want to pick it up. I'm an independent guy and I will. But every once in a while, there's just enough around the circumstance that I don't really know where it is. And I really don't want to, and I wonder if I could have a little help. Well, here's the annoying part, right? And I need to be consistent, but there's times when I would be upset if somebody just bent down to help me. And I generally believe, right, we should all communicate before we do it. And there's times when I'm almost a little upset, emotionally reactive because nobody did offer. Well, I can't have it both ways. I just need to learn to communicate. And I think that the folks that are in our lives would benefit from being able to commiserate and collaborate with each other on that front. One more program, and I think I heard a comment come in that I literally just pitched it yesterday to our CFO. Our orientation mobility instructors have a hard time.
Yeah, because I had it. I literally
somebody
was using it
popped
at
in.
home the other day because
Jacob, we can hear you. There you go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Randy.
So getting our orientation and mobility instructors successfully scheduling appointments, because there's people who just like, they'll find any excuse to bail out and keep them. We have one. I should be grateful that we have an O&M, but filling their time is a challenge. And I said, what if we took all of the many successes, because once people have it and experience that freedom and get those targets and get using it, what if we could put out a list that, the last part of, hey, I think I'm okay. I'll be okay staying here at home. Well, would you be okay if I had, we have somebody who's got a lot of the experiences you have that can share a little bit of their perspective on it. Now what we're doing, I call it steps of confidence, because I think what it'll build is our volunteer base of people who've succeeded get a little purpose, and they'll build their confidence in their own outreach. And we have some training opportunities there. More clients are likely to say yes. We saw that from the Mass Association for the Blind study. And our O&M is going to learn some tips in that too. So there's programs that are totally outside of the VR, but are there to support vision rehabilitation. So let me pause because I've heard a couple of things come in since then.
Yes, we have a comment from Joshua Lucas. He says, I'm an occupational therapy student at Duke University, currently completing my clinical rotation at the Duke Eye Center. Thank you for sharing your story. It's truly inspiring. From your perspective, what opportunities do you see emerging in the field, and what do you think new practitioners can do to best prepare themselves to contribute meaningfully?
Can you give me the last part before to get them to contribute meaningfully? I had a glitch come through.
Sure. It says, from your perspective, what opportunities do you see emerging in the field, and what do you think new practitioners can do to best prepare themselves to contribute meaningfully?
Sure. So there's two opportunities in the field, right? One, we're well immersed into it, and it's simply the notion that baby boomers are getting age-related macular degeneration, have been for a while. So there's a population age spike in the type of services. And what comes with that is additional challenges. That's not a surprise, right? So sometimes it could be cognitive, it could be mobility, it could be hearing. And that complement of service is important. So, that's something that an OT might be particularly good at managing. They can do the assessment test to say, how do I apply the vision rehabilitation after assessing and understanding the other challenges that a person faces, right? So I think there's an opportunity there, right? And that's for low vision, really. There's some effective no vision levels where I think there's some other aspects, but how do we serve that growing community? And to me, there's a medical model opportunity that comes in. That's not really related to holistic, but then building the supports into that is important, because a lot of that population lives in an era where they say, hey, I want to use technology that maybe 15 years ago, they were less likely to be adopting in that category, right? They want to get the Ray-Ban Medicine Learn. They want to know how smart Alexa can augment their worlds, right? So there's opportunities to see how that changes and integrate it. I think, just to speak to the Ray-Bans for a moment, right? You can look through their glasses, and I do not for a moment believe, and maybe somebody will prove me wrong, but I don't think so, that we can provide services from that. But what I do believe is we might be able to assess an environment and a challenge and prepare for providing services in a more powerful way. Next, I'll go right down into the youth models, because in the youth model, what we're seeing is a lot more multiple disabilities coming through that sight may not be their biggest challenge. That's probably one of the biggest challenges my team of TVIs faces, right? And very specifically, the number one challenge in that world, the largest growing, is cortical visual impairment. So maybe understanding what are going to be approaches that can support that, because I think that's a new field that's, it's not really new, but it's developing so fast. I think we need to be open and aware of it. So last piece I'll say, and it happened at Scottsdale, Arizona. There's these taxis, right? The Waymo. We can call an autonomous vehicle to drive us. Really limited right now. Where's it going to go? How do we make sure accessibility stays built in? Right now it is accessible. And how do we make sure we can find ways to build comfort on people being able to use those? So there's 3 quick answers, and I'll pause there.
We have a couple more in the chat, but I also wanted to pause and allow Tim Teggy had his hand up for a moment, so I believe he wants to ask a question.
Hey, Randy, Tim Teggy from Site Center, Northwest Ohio. Considering, do you have any thoughts on this approach as an agency providing services when it comes to serving a large geographic area or a large rural area? How would you see that playing out?
So from a holistic perspective, Tim, just to be clear, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, holistic and like the types of partners, the types of approaches you might take that would be different from more of just a center-based model.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, our entire model is trying to geographically decentralize. That's why the LIFT program is based in the different areas, and that opens up all those areas to see the numbers that shock them. In New Hampshire, there's 28,000 people who are blind and visually impaired, we estimate, and when I break down our map of clients served, we can account for about 11,000 of them, and that's not surprising. But obviously, I want to bridge that gap. But I break it down. I have a map that shows it by each county. And then on the back, each town is listed. And when I go and want to advocate or get a partnership in a town, and I can tell them, hey, in Manchester, New Hampshire, we're serving 1,500, and we know that number is likely to be 3,200 because I can do the math of what we've reached. That gives you a little bit of power to understand community on that front, right? And to get them engaged. But trying to do as much in their area as possible because it's easier for me to get that transportation. And the transportation was the first foundation. Right. Secondly, is to leverage the power of the virtual world to do a lot of that. Right. And that, I don't want everything done there, but I want enough of it done there that we can get them connected in at their convenience in all those locations.
Great. Thank you.
And it looks like Paul Schrader also has a question or a comment.
Hey, Randy, Paul Schrader with the American Printing House for the Blind. Good to hear you. If I apologize if I missed it, but I wonder what your involvement and engagement has been with the organized consumer community, particularly NFB and ACB in New Hampshire.
Right. So we don't have ACB in New Hampshire. We do have NFB. I am a member. We do promote their activities. We try to engage them in a lot of the things we do. They sit on some of our board committees as an advisory member, right? So we want to be engaged and promote that. When we do our activities, they're on our resource list that we give in various accessible formats to let people know here's some power and opportunity that can really make a difference. And that includes your organization. So, absolutely. I think that's all part of showcasing those holistic, that's just a different holistic avenue, right? And it's one where staffing wise, if you get them connected, you may not have to do a lot more work on that because they're going to go and self-support in those areas. So I'd love to take more time, but I know that we don't have a lot more time. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to go to my last slide. It's really my last real slide. I share this. This is a picture in the Andes. We hiked to a mountain called Vinacunca, which is also called Rainbow Mountain, a little easier to say. And geographically, you can see why it's named that, because there are striations of all sorts of color in the rocks. And I shared this particular slide because, we went to Machu Picchu, but we didn't hike in like everybody does. We took you have to drive out of Machu Picchu. You can't hike out because they're trying to conga line people in. And we said, let's skip the 500-person 5-day conga line. Let's just go in and out, and let's go backcountry in the Andes to get a gift. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences. And what it highlighted, as a lot of people say to me, you're so lucky, you get to do so many things. And I say, yes, I'm fortunate, but it's not just luck. Just like these programs aren't just luck, right? John Lennon has a quote. He says, life is what happens while we're busy making other plans. And I get that. Like, I didn't plan to go blind. Many of our constituents didn't. The reality, though, is I think John Lennon got it wrong. Life is most often about what we plan. And that's why I'm urging you, find a plan that's going to find a way to give engagement opportunities, that's going to encourage the use of the skills, that's going to promote a thriving life. Right. And that's the difference for me, is that I've, with the right support and encouragement, started making the plans, finding the way to solve the problems and get out and experience the things that transformed my life. And I think that can be true for absolutely anybody. And that's really what I'm trying to push here. I'll pause here, ask to flip this slide. That's my contact slide, because this is just the first connection event for all of us, right? Many of you I know in various ways, but let's get this holistic program growing and expanding in a variety of ways and find out what is a great success, share it, so that we can all be benefiting from that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jason.
Wow, thank you so much, Randy. I think you gave the quote right at the end that summarizes so much of that, which is, right, as providers, as folks who are having lived experience, or as folks who are working with people who are living with blindness and vision loss, right, we can promote activities that support a thriving life. That's what you ended on, right? And that's the summary of it. To add to our vision rehabilitation practice, our vision rehabilitation administration, to add the idea that we're going to promote activities that support a thriving life. I think that's the summary. I jotted a few other ones down, as I'm sure many did, because you dropped many pearls of wisdom. And you know, mostly though, a big takeaway is I'm pretty hungry for some beef jerky. So I'll go ahead and grab that at the end of I'll go ahead and grab that at the end of this call. But on a serious note, we've really been dedicated to trying to promote and develop the idea that a holistic approach to vision rehabilitation services is really the crux to comprehensive wraparound vision rehabilitation services. And what Randy has gave us at the conference and has given us here is the kernel of, if you can work with folks to help them discover their passion, to help re-engage, what they will then do is continually re-engage in improving their adaptive living skills to continue to participate in what they've identified as their passion. And I think that's such a rich core message. So I want to thank you, Randy, for being a leader in this area, in promoting this portion of the work that Vision Serve Alliance does, as well as being a champion for VSA. Future Insight is a tremendous organization that does wonderful work in New Hampshire. Randy's been an active member and has always been open to hearing from people and sharing ideas, just like he did today. I want to thank everybody for coming. This is time out of your day. I know that these ideas are useful and helpful, and they make us all better practitioners. They improve all the terrific work that we already do. So on that note, let me thank you again for being involved in Vision Serve Alliance. Thank you again, Randy, for your support and for speaking with us and sharing these ideas with us today. And I wish everybody a wonderful afternoon. Thanks again for attending.